Good morning. Welcome to this workshop on organizational development, which is focusing on what's happening in OD in Asia and Europe at the moment. But first of all, let me go back to a slide that I used last year when I had another workshop with you. And this is slide number 3, which is about managing organizational change programs. So what is change? The change we're looking at in OD are to do with the strategy, the culture, the structure, the technologies, and the changes in employees. What's happening right now is that there's an organizational context which we need to look at. So the organizational context is what are the OD challenges in the 21st century? There are many challenges in the 21st century for OD, and it's a time which has never occurred in the past. We now have a more complex world. They include trade wars between the US and China, the EU, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Global business is currently disrupted by the spread of the coronavirus, and it now has curtailed the movement of people within and between countries. We also have major impact on supply chains across the world. We're exposed to vulnerabilities as a result of all of this, which is particularly in relation to finance, travel, hospitality, and the overall health sector across the world. The digital divide becomes more exposed between rich and poor, urban, rural, young and old, and developing and developed countries. Additional challenges are staff diversity. More and more countries are dealing with aging populations, and many countries are seeking to try to extend the working life of employees so that they don't have to replace them. And then you have countries like Japan, which is replacing people with robotics. So the challenge of diversity is greater than ever before. The demographic shift in the aging populations in countries like Korea, Japan, Italy, UK, and France, etc., are also major factors in looking at the direction of OD into the future. We then look at the interdependence among countries, peoples, industries, etc., which has brought many new challenges to OD. We also have the impact of disruptive technologies like robotics, big data, Internet of Things, cloud computing, machine learning, the gig economy, and STEM subjects. This is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. In summary, the challenges faced by OD today are greater than ever before, and we're only beginning to learn how to tackle these. So OD today is a far more exciting business than it was in the past when I was involved in it earlier on in my career. But it's also more challenging. So while we have many more things to look at, we also have more challenges to come to deal with. So the global context, there are many influences which are also important. The question of a lack of a shared vision of what's important in different regions and countries of the world remains dominant. So we can't say one size fits all across the world because it doesn't. The lack of innovation and creativity across gender, age groups and cultures is also a factor. The type of innovation and creativity dominant in some cultures is very different than that dominant in another. Then there's the whole question of lack of trust. The lack of trust in leaders, the lack of trust in industry, the lack of trust in government and politicians and so on becomes even greater in today's world. And so this raises all sorts of questions in terms of organization development. Then the question of poor governance and high levels of corruption, often driven by greed, and asking what's in it for me, WIIFM. Then insufficient learning within and between organizations. Organizations are still not paying enough attention to the lessons they're learning over time. And while the lessons are very rapid at the moment, we need to capture them and keep them on file so that we don't repeat the same mistakes as we've done in the past. Then there's the growing phenomenon of virtual organizations and virtual teams. So how do you do organization development where you have a virtual organization or where you have virtual teams? And then there's the emergence and dominance of fake news. And this is particularly promulgated by what we're seeing out of the US presidency. Fake news is the dominant factor, so we can't believe what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our leaders. And particularly some leaders at the moment are so off the mark in terms of accuracy or factual information or correct information or true information. It's impossible to work out what's true and what's false. The organisation development stages remain the same as they have been before, and these are all in your slide number 8. Now, the role of the OD consultant is gaining access to trust and expertise. They need to be able to analyse and define problems. They need to implement their action plans. They need to monitor and evaluate and stabilise the situation in a company and build continuous improvement processes. OD tools and techniques are very similar to what we had already. The only one that we can add to that is mini lectures and role playing. And these are also tools that the OD consultant can utilise. The 3 big challenges remain the same as we had last year. Change from what the organisation is now to where it wants to be in the future. Change from where the organisation is now to where it wants to be in the future. And change from how the organisation works now to how it might work differently and excellently in the future. So in charting the future, the organisation must be relevant, be responsive, be consistent, be competitive, and be excellent. Now, organisation development consultants, duties and responsibilities, there's a list of those in your slides, and I suggest you have a look at those. The organisation development qualifications, I'm adding 2 additional ones to the list that I gave out last year. First of all, we have the understanding the importance and development of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and understand the implications and uses of disruptive technologies. So the organisation development consultant and education and training, these continue to be fairly similar to what I had last year. The only difference is the scale of salaries may vary differently from what I had in the earlier workshop. Our duties and responsibilities as OD consultants remain very much the same. But the main role of an OD consultant is to guide the process of transforming an organisation from where it is today to some more ideal state or position into the future. So where's the organisation today? You'll see this in your slide. Where it needs to be in the future, and how it gets there is through the appropriate organisation development interventions. So which interventions are appropriate? And what interventions might need to change from country to country, from sector to sector. The same OD interventions will work in some situations, may not work effectively in others. And so again, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. An OD consultant today has to be expert in so many different areas. They need to be flexible and adaptable to the local circumstances and do what's appropriate, not what they think is right. It's what's appropriate in that particular sector, in that particular industry, in that particular country, in that particular culture, with those particular individuals. So the challenge is greater. We must be much more sensitive and aware of who we're dealing with. What does the consultant do? Well, the consultant is, as I've said, bringing the company and the organisation from where it is today to where it wants to be as an ideal future. So that summarises essentially what we're looking at in terms of OD for Europe and Asia. But in effect, organisation development is a global phenomenon, it's a global intervention, it's a global exercise, and so you can't separate out Europe and Asia from the rest of the world. The same kinds of challenges exist throughout the world, but you have to measure those challenges, understand them, and be able to respond appropriately to them. And the appropriateness of your response is what's essential. And the appropriateness of your organisation development interventions is what's going to make a difference in moving a company from where it is today to where it wants to be into the future. Thank you very much.